know what you're about to listen to? The Coolville Urbanism Podcast. I'm your host, Mikael colville-andersen. Back in August 2021, I finally got to visit Helsinki. It was a trip planned for May 2020, but yeah, do I even need to say why it was postponed anymore? I think you know. But off I went. I've been to Helsinki many times, but this was a bit of a different trip. Here on the podcast, I've published interviews with the Deputy Mayor, Annie Sinimäki, and Chief Design Officer, Hannah Harris. But the primary goal of the trip was to stay in a totally off-the-grid tiny house designed and built by a couple of friends, Maya Living. Link in the description. Last year, I was offered a +1 to bring along. Things were different last year, and this year I didn't have an obvious, romantically inclined partner at hand. So I thought about it. The pandemic barriers are falling, and there are people I miss and want to see. Heading to an idyllic location to stay in an architecturally splendid house in the Helsinki archipelago had a clear sense of life-sizedness. It would be an escape that would offer the possibility to take it easy. Take a deep breath. Slow down a bit. That made it obvious. I promptly invited a brother from another mother to hang out with me. Carl Honoré is a writer, broadcaster, and the person who launched the global slow movement upon an unsuspecting, fast-paced world with his book, In Praise of Slow. More recently, he published Bolder, an amazing book about aging positively and tackling the cult of youth and ageism. I'm sure you'll agree that bringing a friend who has said, in a world addicted to speed, slowness is a superpower, on a tiny house weekend wasn't a bad idea. Carl and I have incredibly similar backgrounds. We grew up 3 hours away from each other and are pretty much the same age. We both left to explore the world and both became experts in each our own area. I've published a conversation with Carl here on the podcast before about post-COVID cities and how slowness applies to urbanism. Every time we hang out, we talk. Long and hard, about anything and everything. One topic morphs into another. This podcast episode, however, focuses on a topic I've had in my head for a very long time. Working on my Urbanism TV series, The Life-Size City, for years has inevitably led me to think about other applications of the idea of life-sized. Life-sized living, for example. And life-sized travel. Carl has also been thinking along the same lines. He has developed the framework for a slow travel manifesto. We spoke about this slow, life-sized travel concept, and we decided to slap a microphone on it. We were thinking that it would be a cool TV series for Carl and I to host, exploring a slower way to travel in a post-pandemic world. Eloquent, thoughtful Carl, and energetic, and maybe babbling Mikael. But first we needed to figure out what we thought about the topic, and that is this conversation. There is absolutely no guarantee that we figure it out. It's a rhythmic back and forth stream of consciousness. So have a seat in our tiny house, with a view of ancient granite rock, birds diving for fish outside the window, and the cool gray waters of the archipelago, and let's see what happens. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Crazy weekend in Helsinki, in an off-the-grid tiny house that our friends have designed and built. I mean, not bad at all, huh?
I'm thinking of it as the big weekend in the tiny house.
There you go. Oh, there you go. It's like a children's book.
Yeah.
It's a children's book.
There it
right?
is.
Seriously.
My next oeuvre.
But hey, man, we've been talking about everything as we always do. But I mean, we've talking about like travel, right? And with the Life-Size City Urbanism TV series, I've been thinking for years about like, what about life-size travel? And what is that? You, with your background, with the slow movement and all of your philosophies about living a slower life, you've been saying, dude, like slow travel. Like we kind of have the same idea about it. And we've been bouncing it back and forth. And I just thought we should maybe try and figure out what the hell it is we're talking about. And also, we've been discussing previously about post-pandemic everything. And everybody's saying tourism is going to be different now, and is there a place for slow travel, life-size travel, or whatever name we end up with? Let's just start with a question then. What do you think about where tourism is going to go after this pandemic? Tourism has changed. Over-tourism had disappeared to the joy of the people of Barcelona and Amsterdam and Venice. But what do you think? Where do you think we're going? I mean, is slow travel, life-size travel, is it just sitting out and staring out at the Finnish archipelago and drinking some akvavit and barbecuing meat? Or I mean, what is the travel going to be like now that we're emerging from a pandemic?
Starting with the easy question.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I've been grappling with what travel should be or could be for quite a while. The pandemic came along, and actually, during the pandemic, one of the things that I got taken on a job was to come up with a slow travel manifesto, right? So I've spent a lot of time chewing these ideas over and re-spooling back through my own travel experiences and reading a lot about what people think of travel in the past and how they traveled and how it's evolved and what it might look like post-pandemic. And the short answer is I don't know, right? I don't know what it's going to look like, but I have a feeling that this pandemic moment it feels like a reset, like a kind of reboot moment. You probably feel that too, not just for travel, but just for everything, right? A time where collectively, and I think individually, we've just had a lot of time to go in and think. And I think a lot of people are coming out with this idea now that we should be focusing on what really matters, right? And I think that's going to be the red line that goes through here, through all the way we think about how we eat, the way we make love, the way we educate our children, the way we work, the way we run our countries, the way we travel. I think that idea of decluttering, that kind of going Marie Kondo on things and just getting the guff out of the way and streamlining in on what really counts. So I guess that's the starting point for how I think of what travel might be. What really matters, that's the bigger question, right? And then there's the how, the nuts and bolts. Is it sitting in a tiny cabin looking out on water lapping against ancient granite rock, right? Or can you do slow travel in a bustling city like Barcelona? I think you can. I don't know.
I totally agree. I just think that if we started talking about, which is what we're doing, we're starting talking about it. Yeah. Oh, life-size traveling, slow life-size traveling. I think most people would say, oh, that's going to be like tiny houses in the woods on the fjord. Yeah. It kind of feels like that's what people's perception will be of it. But I totally agree. I think I do it. I think I've always done it in bustling big cities. I don't go and see all the touristy stuff. I never have. I like just to find a cafe, a local cafe, not a Starbucks, like a local place, and just sit there. And then maybe the next day go back and sit there, read books, write, look at the city, see what the people are like in this city by just observing them. Some people find it boring to travel with me because I just want to sit down and drink coffee until it's time to drink wine. But I'm observing the city and then going to a good restaurant or whatever. I don't need to be busy. But
big word you said there, local, the L word. I think that's going to be that life, what do you call it, life-size travel, slow travel. I think that local thing that, we've gone through how many decades now of globalization, and what globalization did was iron out the wrinkles, right? It took away the fine grain. It made everything the same. So I think we've all, especially both of us, we travel for work a lot, and you can get that. If other people are organizing your travel for you, you can be waking up one morning in a hotel, think, is this Toronto? Is it Tokyo? Is it Tel Aviv? Everything looks the same. It feels like it's gone through the same design agency in Copenhagen or something, right? Yeah, everybody's sort of beige and I think
don't diss Danish design.
Oh, it's for a reason. The Danes, it is Danish design that's going to conquer the world in all sorts of for lots of good reasons. But I think that idea of that feeling of being somewhere and plugging in, not ticking boxes, not going to all the old sites that you can just watch on YouTube before you go anyway, right? I think it's going to be serendipity. It's going to be, here we're coming back to small again in size, right? Tiny, we're in a tiny cabin. Maybe slow travel, life-size travel is smaller somehow. We've gone big. It was all big and bold before. But when you go big and bold, you end up with these massive brushstrokes, but you lose the fine grain, right? And maybe it's the fine grain that we're going to come back to. Maybe that's what slow travel or slow/life-size travel. Yeah. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? That kind of idea of local. Keep it small, keep it local.
I think like last year in Denmark, there was that window in the summer where things kind of opened up certain places. I went to Greece for 3 weeks to this island that I've been going to for 20 years, and I love it. Fits well with the slow life-size travel kind of thing we're evolving here. But most people I know
stayed at home. They went, yeah, we're not going to make the risk and buy the tickets and maybe lose them if another wave hits, all that, the uncertainty of the pandemic last year. So many of us, of them, went to Denmark. Let's just go investigate our own country. Danes are, the small countries are famous for like traveling far, because we don't have a lot of action. The French hang out a lot in France because there's so many different things to do and see. So Danes went, no, let's just go to that island. We got 700 of them. Let's go to that island. I've never been there, Yeah. And they really discovered, like, on my social media and my Facebook, everybody's going, oh my God, it's just so cool. And the weather was great, so that helps. So that was kind of local in a sense, right? Also, people during lockdowns just wandering around their neighborhoods for the first time, discovering things they didn't know were right around the corner. That kind of local exploration, I think, it totally is the key. This year, a lot of Danish friends said, we're going to go investigate more of Denmark. Local is important. I don't know if there's a certain trend towards it, but I feel like because of the restrictions, that we've had over the past time, we're sort of forced to look inwards to our own nation. Maybe in the UK also, a lot of people were just like wandering around the UK and hiking or, trekking or whatever.
Yeah, no, this trip I'm doing here with you now is the first time I got on a plane in, a year and a half, right? Yeah. So, and I intensely miss the Mediterranean, the long holidays and but yeah, so I even my own life, we've discovered a whole other corner of England I'd never really been to before, up by
Hadrian's Wall. Yeah, last week we were on Hadrian's Wall.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a whole, rich story of the Roman, just extraordinary story. And plus, gorgeous landscapes. It's not as warm as it is in southern Italy, right? And the wine isn't as good. But yeah, I think that kind of rediscovering, I think sometimes when I think of travel, people, they think of it as the simple building blocks, right? You get your passport, you pack your bag, you go to another place, right? But I think a lot of the best travel is internal, right? It's the journey that you're going on inside your head, the way you change when you go to a different place, or that shifting of modes maybe is part of slow travel, life-size travel, perhaps. I don't know. The idea of the internal journey that runs in parallel alongside the external journey, right? Yeah. So I think that's been a big part of the pandemic is people have done a lot more internal journeying, right? Rethinking, coming out of the pandemic. My social media feed is full of people coming out inverted commas, right, of the pandemic and saying, you know what, I've had some time to think things over, and the life I was leading before was not the life for me, right? So now they're either leaving relationships or changing jobs or moving, out of the city to the countryside, or the countryside to the city, and so on. So I think that idea of space, that peace that you get, you described it perfectly there, sitting with a coffee, right? You're not moving physically, but you're kind of doing a kind of travel as you go. Things are moving around you. You're picking things up.
Without really having ever identified what my idea of life-size travel was, you have more thoughts about slow travel, but I think we can agree it's never in a hurry, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be exactly Carl's slow, it's just like, you don't have to, okay, kids, get out. We have to see 5 museums and then we have to do that. That's just
definitely not it.
Oh my God, no. Or like hurrying up and standing in line for the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona for 4 hours and,
Or going there for the Instagram, right? I think a lot, that's in the last 5 years, I'd say that for so many people now that has become the experience itself, is the taking of the photo.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I love Instagram. I love it. And I love that, that it brings these stories out and people create their experiences through this community. But still, you're looking at Sagrada Familia for the first time, but you're only looking at like, okay, which filter should I have? It's kind of like,
is this the best angle for?
Yeah.
Or if you go to well-known spots and there'll be a queue of people all waiting to take their Instagram shot, in the same place. And you think, but I think we probably agree that doesn't qualify as life-size travel. Or
Santorini, there's the sunset spot in Santorini. There's literally a line waiting, and you got 8 seconds. Get out. The sun's setting, man. You're a little more far advanced with your thinking, and we're going to get to that. But we've also been talking about like a TV series, right? Like you and I doing a TV series about slow travel, and this is also kind of like a conversation. Like, what's that going to be like? Do we just eat food, nice cafes, and stare at cities? That's maybe not good TV. I don't know. But
sounds like fun though.
No, I want that series. Yeah. But yeah, no. Okay. So the slow travel manifesto. You actually have words about this, man. How do you describe what the manifesto would entail?
Yeah. Well, it's got, I think, 12 points, right? So it's kind of fleshing out the whole idea of slow travel. So it will be. We talked about the local, right? About learning. You mentioned learning, having your antennae, picking up new words, all that kind of new experience. Wow. Another one of those bird drops. Sorry.
This is what we've been doing all day today.
Yeah.
This is what we've been doing. We're staring at birds diving for fish. It's like that's all there is to do here, which is really awesome.
It's like a vast Technicolor, movie screen here.
Yeah.
It's all we need in this moment. The Slow Travel Manifesto. There'll be things like serendipity, local, savoring moments rather than counting them. I mean, there's a lot of sort of pretty straightforward, grabby language, but I think it boils down to some people talking about mindful travel. I suppose it's going to be a bit of that as well. There will have to be, I think, an environmental angle. Treading lightly on the planet should be part of slow travel, I think, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Some kind of social justice angle, like you should be somehow leaving the place you visit better than you found it, not just environmentally, but maybe socially, economically somehow. I don't know. There's so many things that I'm still playing around with, rather just spinning around.
But it's
plates
cool.
in the air. But
I've done a couple of segments on the Life Size City YouTube channel, Life Size Travel. But one of them was hiking into the remote beach in the Lofoten Islands a couple of years ago, and just the simple message, take everything with you, right? It's just toilet paper. There's only really kind of hikers and people overnighting there, but still there's just, you go around the corner, there's just toilet paper. You take your toilet paper with you, however disgusting that is, but you still do it. You don't leave it there on a remote beach in the Arctic Ocean. My God, really minimizing your footprint. But I guess you could just go for a slow bike ride. You could just a bike tour through Italy or through the wine regions of France. That seems like it'd work with slow life-size travel. You're just taking it easy.
Yeah.
An old vintage bike, so if you're talking about the environmental footprint, and an old Peugeot or something. Yeah.
Having long leisurely meals, reading an Italian novelist not as you recycle, but in between. Right? We definitely want multitasking out of the equation when it comes to.
Okay, but wait, the Italians literally have invented 100 years ago a little folder for your handlebars where you could fold your newspaper and it would clip into place and you could read the newspaper as you cycle. I have one at home in Copenhagen. It's literally, it's a porto giornale, carry your newspaper, but whatever. It's so that's okay. Maybe we can read a bit on a quiet road where there's no traffic.
Quiet road being I live in London. I wouldn't be doing a porto giornale.
No.
If I did, I wouldn't be sitting with you now in one seat.
What do you think your best holiday has been in your life along the lines of what we're talking about now?
Yeah. I think another word that comes to mind is memory. I think that's an important part, forging memories, and that part of that is being present in there and doing one thing at a time and so on. And I think for me, if I think of one of my best holidays was when we did as a family, when my children were smaller, we did a houseboat holiday a houseboat cycling holiday in the Netherlands. So a bunch of families all lived and slept on a boat, we ate, and then every day we would cycle, 40 kilometers to the next place. And the final day of that journey took us into Amsterdam, and it was pouring around. The rain was coming in, sideways, and everybody on the boat said, "We're just going to ride the boat in. It's just too grim, right, to get on a bike." Except for my son, who is 8 years old, and he said, "We're going to ride this." So I rode it with him. So of all the people, the two of us rode it through him. And I remember at one point we were just coming up a bridge, and it was up, and my son we were in a tandem, right? The rain whipping in. And my son suddenly lifted himself up and was pumping away to get us up the hill faster and faster. And I just thought, God, this is... And then we pulled into the place where the boat was waiting for us. And I remember my son jumping into my arms and saying, "We did it, Daddy, we did it." Yeah. And I can still smell his hair, right? His wet hair. And I think probably those simple moments that, not really even, that wasn't scripted, right? That just happened. And it happened because I was there with a slow mindset, right? I didn't have a packed schedule. I didn't have expectations of what I needed to do. I think that's maybe gets at what this life-size slow travel is. Maybe it's kind of just being open to whatever happens in the moment, I suppose, in a sense, and allowing yourself just to sink into whatever unfurls in front of you. And that happened because I wasn't looking at Instagram, because, so maybe that's another way to think about slow travel, is that it comes back to serendipity again as well.
I just thought of the question and asked you, but I don't know. I sailed from Fiji to New Zealand with an older German nudist couple. They just need an extra hand on deck back in the night. That was a weird experience, but that was very fucking slow. Just sailing to New Zealand and there's nothing else. But I'm trying to think. I just got home from 2 weeks in Greece, this island that I go to. There's a lot of people I know who go there from Denmark, an old Danish kind of tribe. There was nobody there. I didn't know anybody. I know the locals at the cafes and said hello, but then I'm starting to write this novel, right? So I was completely engulfed by writing this novel by hand in my moleskin journal. And the first week I was obsessed. I didn't speak to anybody except for the waiters and the bartenders and whatnot. When you write, you sit like you write intensely all day long on a beach. You're weird. People stare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're an outlier.
The point is here that after a week, I started to meet some people and they're going, what are you writing? For God's sakes. They just couldn't hold it in anymore. What are you doing? And then I started to meet people and I was incredibly social. And I think I also needed to be incredibly social after 7 days of really solitude in a crowd. Then I just went, okay, boom, I wrote every day, but like I was much more social. I think that meeting people is kind of the long point I'm trying to reach here, where you travel alone, which is a whole different ballgame. Not many people can do it; they don't dare, but you see you see a couple over there, whether they're 25 or 65, and like they just have no dinner conversation, And man, meeting people and being forced to go out and meet strangers, for me, that is part of the slow life-size travel. Engaging with the local environment, the local people. Maybe they don't want to talk to you. There's your problem, but you'll figure that out, right? Making yourself feel not like an alien, but as somebody who belongs in that place by being interested in the people around you or the other travelers as well, right?
Yeah.
We have that silo when we travel, the blinders on, and I think that needs to fall and disappear, where we engage with other humans and share that experience, wherever we happen to be.
Yeah, that's the whole kind of fast life or kind of fast existence, it seems to me, or the virus of hurry dehumanizes us, right? Because human relationships obviously are slow, they take time and so on. And it's by slowing down, I think, that you rehumanize, right? And I think that especially when you travel, that kind of richness comes through and you meet other people. I think you can play the two off like you did in Greece, where you have your solitary time.
Yeah.
I love to travel. I mean, you like traveling alone too, right? We both like, yeah. And I'm a very social person. I'm gregarious. I love being around people, but I also love to be alone. And I sometimes feel this, some of the best travel I've done has been solitary travel, actually. But weirdly, as a kind of addendum to that, what you just said there, it's solitary travel where I'm solitary, but I've kind of made some kind of connection with someone. Right?
Yeah, get your feelers out, right?
Yeah, and something your antennae are on, and something just comes across your radar, and poof, suddenly you're having a conversation with a person you'll never forget, right?
Yeah. I just remembered my ultimate answer to my question. Years ago, mid-90s, I walked from just the north of Catalonia to a vineyard east of Paris, 900 kilometers in 35 days with a tiny backpack, a little sleeping bag. I wanted to do this dogmatic, insistent on walking journey, self-discovery, whatever. And then after I was done, I lived on a remote French farm alone for 5 months. So like that was a lot of alone time.
Yeah,
and so in a way, very life-size, very, very slow. But yeah, I didn't interact with a lot of people. I was just really this weird phase in my life. But like as doing some stupid journey like that, like just walking through France on by roads, and sleeping rough every night, and then living alone in an old stone house, life changing. I don't know, maybe life screwing up. I don't know how that all affected me, but yeah, feelers out and engaging with the local environment and not being afraid to.
It's interesting, that kind of local connection thing. That's one of the things that sort of disappoints me about Airbnb. I don't know. Do you use Airbnb when you travel?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was for a long time. It was my first port of call.
Where it doesn't mess with the local housing issues.
I know now I've got
now
I've got a lot of misgivings about an Airbnb. But one of them is that I think it's changed in spirit. It started off, it seemed to me anyway, the way I used it and encountered it on the web was it plugged you into local places. So instead of staying in hotels, which tend to be in sort of hotel areas of the city, right? Suddenly you're in a neighborhood, which you would never normally, that would have no hotel. You'd not stay there unless you had a friend. Yeah. You could be staying in someone's spare room, you could get there, but you're plugged into a local network already. There's a cafe around the corner. They tell you where their groceries are best bought. This is a really nice pizza. There's an old lady who comes down the stairs and might need help getting her newspaper. All that sort of stuff. But I feel like Airbnb has moved away from that. I don't know, but you people, and now it's just corporate, right?
The idea from the very beginning, I just thought was pure brilliance. Now we know how it destroys neighborhoods, detrimental effect on the housing in in cities around the world, and cities are banning it or limiting it. I mean, so yeah.
Oh no, it's become a blight in many places. No question.
But the idea, yeah, absolutely. My neighborhood where I live in Copenhagen, there's nothing to see for tourists. They don't go there. It's like, and then Airbnb showed up, and I rented a room in my home for 5 years. I literally always had some foreigner living in. My kids are like, we have guests this weekend? Yeah, there's a couple from France or something. Oh, okay. You know, it's like this became really cool experience. But yeah, all of a sudden you see tourists with their rolling luggage and the dad looking at the phone. I think it's down this road. Never happened before, but that's good for my local economy. The local shops, you know, they benefit from having that kind of tourism if you do it right and you don't just rent your apartment where somebody else could be living there. You know, as we know, the whole Airbnb dilemma, right? But no, I think that's been a super interesting and forcing you out into other parts of the city, right? But then there's also still, even in Copenhagen, more so in other cities. I remember years ago, a friend of mine, there's this really cool bar in Prague. It's like there's no tourists there. You know, it's like 10 million tourists a year in Czech Republic. And so we went out there, me and my friend, and we walked in, and everybody just turned and looked, and they just went like a collective, oh, fuck my life. The tourists have found us. And we're not those kind of tourists. Then you're like, I'm not that kind of tourist, but then what is that? Yeah. And they were just said, this is like, probably, it was like the last bar in Prague where the, foreigners had,
untouched by.
Oh my God. So that was like, we kind of tried to win hearts and minds, and we succeeded. And we literally said, we won't tell anybody about this bar. The bartender's going, really? Yeah. And then we kind of, had a few drinks, and that was fine. But they were happy to see our rear ends leaving, I think. But even in Copenhagen, I have a couple of places. I sit at my favorite local wine bar way too often. Everybody on Instagram knows when I'm there, and but I still have places where I go and eat, which nobody knows about. I don't tell anybody. I don't want that to be overrun, even with the cool kind of tourists who really want to experience the local experience. I think we all have our secret places in cities we don't spread.
We do, I think, and as people who do public stuff, people are always writing to me. I'm sure the same to you. They say, I'm coming to Copenhagen, I'm coming to London, what do you suggest? And I have my go-to list of places to eat, places to walk, but I have a little secret list that I don't share for that reason. Right? Even in a big city like London, right? There's places you don't want them to be, discovered / destroyed, right? Because one leads so often to the other, I think.
I mean, my local wine bar in Copenhagen, like with TripAdvisor and all the apps that started to come out, right, through the years. I've been sitting there for many years, but you started to see these, lots of foreign languages today. But it was always the people who dared, to go into the local neighborhoods and not just schlep down to the Little Mermaid and say, go to Tivoli or do whatever you do in whatever city you're in. It's like that kind of tourist, and I don't even know what that means, but it's like, okay, they're cool. They're going, we're in a local environment. There are locals sitting here. This is their place. We can't be too loud. We're engaging, but we're also still observing politely. I think I don't even want to give it a name, but there's probably a name we could give that kind of tourist, the one that really benefits the local economy.
They tend to call themselves travelers. I think,
rather
than tourists.
Yeah. That's Scandinavian Airlines' slogan at the moment. We are travelers. So they appropriated that word. Yeah. All right.
You mentioned TripAdvisor. That made me think about how I think travel has changed for a lot of people now with the internet, right? So before you maybe looked at a guidebook or you talked to a friend or two, and you discovered as you experienced the place. Now you can go online and read every review about every restaurant in that town. You can watch videos of the square where the fiesta is happening. You can experience the whole holiday mediated through a screen before you even get there. And I think a lot of people do. They fall into that trap. You go down that rabbit hole. You go online thinking, well, I'll just get a few things in the diary, right, for that week. Next thing you know, you're actually having the trip from your laptop screen at home before you go. And then what does that do when you arrive, right? You've already got someone else's filter and version of what's happened, and you're not. And I think that maybe that's another way to think about life-size slow travel is you go as a blank slate, right? There's curiosity. You go without expectations, or you certainly go without a tightly woven schedule, right? Where everything is all mapped out in advance, and you already have the pictures in your head because you've seen other people's version of them before you even step into the frame.
I never want to be the guy who's like, oh, things were different when we were young kids. Oh, yeah, it was better. I mean, I hate that narrative from older people, man. I do, though. I mean, wonder how the hell did we backpack around the world with a used Lonely Planet, and get from an airport, me in Australia and Asia and former Soviet Union. You did a lot in South America. I mean, we were many places when we were young with our backpacks. Like, just think of the logistics. How did we even survive? How do we get to that hostel? Nowadays it's just like, you follow a phone.
You just,
and you're already booked on. I mean, and that's great. Like, that ease of travel is fine. But I mean, I'm literally thinking, like, how did I get from the airport in Hong Kong? Like, was there a bus back in 1990 or 19? Yeah. It's like, it's kind of cool though, having to follow maps, back then.
I think I'm just listening to you now. I think, how did we do it? We asked people.
True. Yeah.
We just turned to another human being and said, is there a bus into town? Or where's a good place? Whereas now, the temptation, and it's often super useful. I use the internet as well to find things when I'm abroad. But I think that becomes the default option, right? That becomes the everything. Then you lose out on all those little serendipitous connections, right? Where you meet someone. I met incredible people, those backpacking trips, I'm sure you didn't meet too many people on that long solitary walk.
Yeah, but all the other ones around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And some of the people I'm still in touch with, 10, 15 years later, 30 years later, from people I met backpacking around Europe in my teens and stuff. I guess now the temptation, it's just so easy to just fall into that screen thing, or you just.
I met a guy. He came from the States a few years ago into Copenhagen. I'm just thinking we have. The force is strong within this one. An older gentleman, but he wanted to do some business connections with where he's from, his city in the States and Copenhagen. So he had a lot of meetings set up, and I met. He wanted to meet me about stuff, and we had a coffee at a cafe. And then he said, "Great, really nice to meet you. We'll email, blah blah." He says, "Hey, so I got to go to this address. Where is it?" And I was like, you have an iPhone on your like did you can use your phone? And he said, "Okay." I look at the map in the morning. And then I don't look at it. And then I go up to people all day long and say, "Hey, I have to go to this address." I'm going, "What? That's so awesome." He says, "It's so awesome. I talk to strangers all day long." Yeah. And I had answered first. I said, "Okay, well, that's a bit far, like a half an hour walk, but just walk down to the end of the street, turn left at the train station, get to the big road, and then ask somebody else there." And then he said, "That's what everybody says. If I'm far, it's like, go there, but then ask somebody else."
Yeah.
And then as I narrow it in, people are saying, "Okay, you see the red house," and then it gets closer. So I just thought that is a really great way to experiment with slow life-size travel, is forcing yourself to actually talk to people and find your way with it. And he had the address written down.
That's genius. That's kind of also pushes you into like getting lost creatively, right? Yeah. Because so often I find, you probably find this too, that when, especially in certain countries, people, when you ask them for directions and they don't know where it is, they still feel they have to give you directions. Yeah. Right? It's like, and they're often sending you 180 degrees in the wrong direction. But that's okay too, because you end up doing, well, unless you're going to miss a terrible, urgent appointment. But mostly you're not, right?
Yeah.
If you've done the
I don't know,
right.
But it sounds like it might be in that direction. Like they're trying.
And you walk off there.
But I'm not sure. It is totally down there. It is 412 meters, whatever.
This is reminding me that when I first started doing the whole thing on slow, a big part of that is rejigging your relationship with time, right? And I stopped wearing a watch, right, as an experiment for a week, because I'd read a lot of stuff about how just seeing a clock face accelerates us, makes us anxious about the passage of time and so on, right? In fact, there's some research showing that when women in their late 20s hear a clock ticking, they think about pregnancy. So these are kind of hardwired in through our culture. I know, it's a little bit odd.
The biological clock, literally.
Well, there it is. There's the metaphor in action. Yeah. And I took the watch off for a week and have never worn one since, right? So that's 20 years ago. And when I noticed, and this was before I was carrying a phone around with me all the time, I didn't know what time it was. And occasionally there'd be a clock, but mostly I had to ask people. And it just sort of, throughout my life, I just found myself constantly saying to people, not constantly, but just saying, "You have the time." And a number of people, defenses would come down and you suddenly have a conversation, right? And I did my own city in London, right? And I've made a couple of good friends that way, Met someone on a bus who is still a really good friend, I just asked her what time it was. Yeah. So I think that, that sort of nudging yourself into having some kind of social contact, that's going to be part of this travel thing we're talking about here, whatever we end up calling it. Yeah. It's going to be that kind of getting the social thing going.
I've never worn a watch. Like, I just never wanted to.
I noticed that. I should have asked you before,
I think I own like an old vintage one I bought in the Soviet Union on a street or whatever. But I mean,
I got given a watch actually by a design company. I don't think they're Danish this time. I think it might be Swedish, called the Slow Watch.
Okay.
And it has just one hand.
Okay.
24 clicks and one hand. So it doesn't go whole hog, and as in not having to watch it all, but it's removing your focus from the minutes, right? And thinking bigger picture, longer term horizons. You just worry about the hours then,
it's
right?
It's not 3:00 yet. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or it's so small now with my eyesight. It's like I can't tell if that's 3, 4, 5. And what does it matter, right?
But you still don't wear a watch.
No, I haven't. No.
Right.
Yeah, I wore the slow watch for a bit. Occasionally I busted out for a bit of fun, but no, I never wear a watch at all. Now I can look at my phone, but I still do ask people what time it is. You know, and especially in countries where I don't speak the language, and I'll find out how to say what's the time, right, in the local language sometimes. So I used to know how to say it in Mandarin, all kinds of places which I don't know anything about the language. I would have in those days tried to learn how to say, what's the time? Excuse me, what's the time? And then you're off to the races.
Every time we talk, it's like we flashback. I'm going, man. When I was backpacking, like my party trick was I could say I love you in 26 languages. Like that was just party trick, trying to impress the girls or whatever, right? But yeah, I don't remember. I have no idea how many I remember now. But yeah, that was funny, right? There's Carl walking around going, "Do you have the time?" There's Michael going, "I love you." Oh, met us on the backpacking trail somewhere in the world. You know where to find us.
We'd have been really useful at the Tower of Babel, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
Do you know what time it is? I love you. Right?
Oh my God. All right.
I love you. Do you know what time it is? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could go either way, right?
Because I want to remember
order.
the moment that we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, this is getting corny now. But if I said to you, hey, I said to you, hey, do you want to come to Helsinki?
Yeah.
Here we go. No, but if you could choose, all of a sudden your weekend opens up in our busy work schedule. All right, you got 4 days, man, and you have to do a slow, life-sized, travel-y kind of thing. Not to do any demonstrative things, but boom, what's your first choice? Do you go hiking? Do you go to New York? I don't know.
Yeah, gosh.
What's your default?
I think the word that's flashing on my screen right now is food, right? I feel like food is at the heart of a life well lived, right? Mm-hmm. Of good travel. It's about food because food is nourishing and it's learning about local culture. It's companionship, breaking bread together and all that stuff. So I think food would have to be in there, but the food could be, as we've been doing here in our tiny cabin, barbecuing potatoes or whatever and sausage, or
lighting a fire in like on a windstorm.
Yeah, exactly.
But
we got the fire going. We got a raging fire going. Or it could be food, in an amazing little truck stop diner in Mississippi or something. So I food, I suppose. Is that it? What about you? What would be your go-to?
Bars,
or plural, right?
4 days, man.
Oh, true. Yeah.
I had an idea for like a travel guide. I used to do a lot of travel writing, and both the journalists as well. Mm-hmm. So I had this idea, like maybe more of an app thing. I just remember this. All these ideas you get, and then you say, oh, never mind, you move on. 3 restaurants, 2 bars, and a neighborhood. And then you live in London, and this was the idea. I said, right, Carl, you're my friend in London. If you're coming for 3 days, right?
Yeah.
What are the 3 places to eat? The 2 bars, because there's 2 nights, because you got a 3-day trip.
Yeah.
And what neighborhood do you stay in, right? And then you would write it, and I would get friends from Calgary, from Vancouver, from Tokyo, and everybody would come with their recommendations about, because that's all you need if you're on a quick weekend. You need 3 restaurants, you need 2 bars, and I need 2 bars, but you need a neighborhood, right? Yeah. Everybody asks me, like, where's a cool neighborhood to stay in Copenhagen? Because all the hotels are clustered around the central city. So, that's kind of a fun idea, like to think as a guide, and then people can explore from there. But
that's a bit like, doesn't the New York Times do 36 hours in?
Okay, yeah.
They have so it's a bit like that. It's good. If you land in place X for 36 hours, here are the, I don't know if it's probably got, I think it is 3 restaurants actually, now I think about it.
Jesus. Okay. Good ideas are universal, I guess, yeah. Huh. Okay, I don't know what it kind of depends. Like if it's just me alone with my own question, I'd probably go to like a big city that I hadn't been to before. Mm-hmm. Like I like going back to cities and then feeling familiar and walking into a bar and, oh, weren't you here last year? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had that really stupid wine tab. We remember you, or whatever. Like you just being remembered.
Back.
Yeah. For me, that's really important. When I go to a place and I find a cafe, and then maybe like a wine bar or a restaurant later, I keep going back to them because I want that feeling of recognition. I want to come in on the 3rd day and they're going, hey, you're here again. Cool. No, well, welcome. Yeah, well, here, you have a glass of wine on it. You feel like a tiny little bit of a local, right? Instead of just bouncing around to all these different bars and restaurants all day long, where you're just anonymous. Maybe you had a great experience. But yeah, it is an absolute win for me in the slow life-size travel sweepstakes. When I sit down again, they're going, senor, or oh, monsieur, or whatever. You again. Or oh, you again. It depends on what happened previously. But no, I'm just going, yes.
Yeah.
I'm here now. Then maybe I can go back again, but then I can move on. I love that shit. I mean, and I just completely forgot what I was about to say when I got onto that track. But
I'm thinking you could call that the Cheers effect. Yeah, like a place where everybody knows your name.
Yeah. No. No, so if I'm by myself, probably a city I've never been to. If I had that luxury of the 4 days, I could do whatever I wanted, and you were paying. I'll just do that. But then if I have I want to bring somebody, like if I have a girlfriend, a dating thing, maybe like a city that I know well, and then go to familiar places. My friend in Paris at his wine bar, that feeling local, but bringing somebody with me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, I like that. And then I invited you here in the middle of the Finnish archipelago. But then we're also in Helsinki, right? We got a bit of a urban rural going on here.
Yeah, and we did slow in both, life size in each. Although I guess we're both coming to this. This is cabin. This is new for both of us, right? So we're in that basket, right? Where you're not my Virgil leading me through the tiny cabin. We both discovered the tiny cabin.
No, we just
together.
showed up at the boat with bikes and people brought us here. The guys who made it, right? But and we don't know how to get home. We're hoping the guy's coming back with the boat at some point, bringing us like supplies. It's so cool. And it's only 15 minutes by boat to Helsinki city center, right? So, that'd be cool. I'm not an outdoorsy guy. I don't, want to sit in a cabin for 2 weeks. I'd prefer being in a big city or something. But this is awesome. Just like
you get best. It's the old best of both here, isn't it? Yeah.
You can see Helsinki in the distance there, but you're really not in Helsinki. It's literally, the archipelago,
deep Finland. Yeah.
So I don't know if we got anywhere with this conversation. Some of our conversations end up in a good place. Some of them are like, But I mean, the idea of a slow life-size travel, I think it totally has value, especially post-pandemic or just generally among humans in the world. But
it did before the pandemic. I think probably even more now.
Yeah. I mean, like they talk about micro travel, right? Where like the guys who made this house, which is off the grid, it just arrives. It takes a day to put it together, and you're living in this home. You don't need to lay the foundation for a massive hotel in some resort area and completely destroy the environment. These things arrive, blah, 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 blah. You got 50 of them, and then you can take them and move them away later, right? Yeah. So it's sort of acupuncture travel, micro travel. There's probably lots of phrases we can make up, but that's actually maybe a development where we're going post-COVID, where we want that, as you're saying, the scaled down experience, not just slow, but scaled down, local, as you said.
I think we just want less. I think there was just so much. Everything was more before the pandemic. I think people were already coming around to the idea that more is not more, right? But I think that's certainly my feeling. I don't know. Don't you feel that? I just feel like I want less stuff, less stress, less somehow. Less and better. Yeah.
One thing I find interesting with the digital world is all my whole life I've always had a book with me when I'm going to a cafe or a bar, or if I sit at a cafe reading and then I meet a friend at a bar, there's always a book on my table. But things are different now. People read less, unfortunately. That book is an absolute icebreaker. The weirdest people lean over going, "What are you reading?" Conversations emerge. 22-year-old dude from Germany in a cocktail bar in Barcelona saw this one book, 21 Lessons from the 21st Century. And it's a busy cocktail bar. And is this your book? Are you reading that? I'm going, yeah. He says, oh, I'm reading it too. What do you think? Talk to the guy for an hour about the book. Like somebody I would never talk to about a book like that. And anyway, that's a great pro tip, I think, when you're traveling. Even if you don't read, bring a book. But make sure you know what the book's about. If you really have maybe a problem engaging with other people, bring a book and you just I was in Beirut like early pre-pandemic, and I was reading a book about like how societies since the Babylonian age have punished sexuality, in all these different ways, and how religion has played a massive part in, that's bad, you can't do that. And the title of the book was Sex and Punishment. That was on a table. There are people walking down and see the book, and they're just like passing, and it says "sex and punishment." Some of these people
read different ways.
They're like looking at me and then like hurrying off. It's about never mind. So it's actually designing the book if you want to play the game, right? Maybe a book that you've read, but you can take the right book for
different contexts,
dating or intelligent conversation or whatever. Okay, we'll shut up now. We'll shut up after that story. God, thanks for listening to Sex and Punishment. Oh my God! All right, let's make fire and eat food.
50 shades of food, I say.
And do it in a life-sized, slow manner.
That wraps up another episode of the Coolville Urbanism Podcast. I'm your host, Mikael Colville-Andersen. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's your city. Take it back.